Futurama comic issue 79. Farnsworth intentionally messes with his crew's heads by saying Scruffy's no longer with them because he's on vacation, on a cruise across the galaxy, and yet he can't afford to give anyone a raise. No one questions how Scruffy can afford this or why he has vacation when Farnsworth can get away with not giving anyone sick days. Leela wonders who will clean up after Fry. I wonder why he doesn't build a robot to clean up. And Amy gets a call from Kif who says he's dead. She tells him to hold on because she's almost done with this level of Candy Crush. Kif says he's as good as dead. He would have said that right away then. He says that the doctor gave him the results from his annual physical this morning and he has 5 days left to live. Is this a sitcom cliche? Not only have I seen this in The Simpsons, but I saw it in The Jetsons too. It must have been really forgettable because I don't remember what the plot of that was at all. Let me guess. His doctor was wrong. Which doesn't even make sense because this is far into the future. I hope the writer realizes that no one's going to believe his doctor was actually right. Kif says it's traditional for his people to have a wake before they die. That's ridiculous because if it turns out they're not going to die after all, which would happen all the time, they'll end up wasting a lot of money. Leela assumes Amy's upset about things getting messy without Scruffy, which makes sense because Amy's a rich girl. And it'd be nice if we were told that she gives all of the employees extra money to compensate for their low salaries, to explain why they don't quit working here. But I assume she's too sociopathic to do that. Bender gets told about a machine that goes around the world cleaning in seconds. Why wouldn't he fire Scruffy after inventing this thing? He was smart enough to give his Roomba a safety horn to tell people to get out of his way. But since it's so fast, it doesn't give Bender enough time to do so. Amy thanks Leela for helping her plan the funeral. Leela lampshades her own awkward phrasing, and they waste time going to a funeral home that's mostly boring. The jerk working there emotionally manipulates Amy into trying to go for a more expensive casket. Unrealistically, there's a coffin with 6 rooms, 2 bathrooms, a pool, and aviary. He wonders if Leela's the physics police. The coffin would have to be made by a wizard. Instead of explaining that, he says something stupid. Bender holds an anvil over his head, which only makes sense because he quoted Bugs Bunny. So now I know what I'm gonna be in for and won't be disappointed. A fun story where Bender keeps getting what's coming to him. He has birdseed on the floor as bait for the Roomba, and fortunately explains why he has the anvil. He mounted blacksmith. Him explaining where he got the anvil is a lot better attention put into having the writing make sense. The Roomba predictably goes past the step ladder and makes Bender fall. Bender says, I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh well, I'm sure it'll come to me. And he gets hit by an anvil. And the reason the slapstick works is that he's a robot. So it actually makes sense that it could take a lot of over-the-top slapstick and be repaired. I guess we'll have to just assume that Farnsworth is why he's back to normal in every scene. But maybe him still being damaged in the next scenes would be funnier. Because he looks funny when he's damaged, and he'd look like an idiot for never giving up and getting progressively more damaged. Fry wonders why Leela isn't helping Amy pick out her widow's dress, and gets told that her idea of a formal outfit is ironing her tank top. And I'm sure she wore a formal outfit before. They go to a shop where widow wears somehow their specialty. Normally this kind of plot point where a character gets told he's gonna die and doesn't, leads to a plot where he tries to do everything he wanted to do in life in one day. So it's less cliche than it could be, because instead it takes the route that Kif isn't allowed to take a day off work. Amy wants her dress to show how sad she is. And somehow she gets a dress that sucked all of the color out of the room and makes people sad. And you're not allowed to drive while wearing it. I wish it was explained that a wizard made this dress. Bender gets a special delivery from the Bimo Corporation. I wish it was called Acme instead. And I like that we learn how he gets this stuff. He says he's setting up a magnetic trap for the Roomba. Zoidberg always manages to find the bright side. He then talks as if looking through dumpsters is his hobby instead of something he needs to do, because he's a bad liar. Bender says he needs to press a button on the remote control when the Roomba comes by, and wonders where he put it. This is out of character because Bender is more than used to hiding stuff in his chest compartment. Instead of having it there, the Roomba runs into it when it's on the floor and conveniently has its button facing the side. Normally the Simpsons comic ads are an annoying intrusion, but the next page suddenly saying "Dough" actually works out pretty well after what's gonna happen. Bender gets stuck to a magnet and uncharacteristically doesn't get forced to sing folk songs. I guess that part of him is still gone after Farnsworth removed it. Instead, Zoidberg's dumpster gets sent all the way to him. Zoidberg's just happy he needs his help and gets told to clean up the mess. Amy hugs Kemp and says it's so good to see him, even if it's only for an hour for his lunch break. That sounds generous for him. Amy says she set things up for his wake inside and wants him to take a look at it. There's already a fake out with Kemp dying in one of the movies, so doing it again is just lazy. Bender has to clean up the mess he made, and it turns out Farnsworth was smart enough to make the room runner able to tell him if someone made a mess, just in case. I love that it's almost called the Road Runner. Kemp surprisingly shows compassion by asking what happened to Bender. Amy doesn't care and tells him to see the hangar, which shows a huge curtain saying "We'll miss you" and a big picture of him where his head is too big. And a curtain over the ship saying his name, and a bunch of flowers. All he does is say that it's okay, and he wanted it to be special. Huh? That's not special? They deserve each other. I didn't think they had this in common. At least he says he doesn't want to be a bother by telling her to change something. That's more character. I'd expect Kip to just tell Amy she's spending too much on him. He gets called back to work because Zap drove the ship into the space zoo and he's being harassed by the monkeys. Maybe I'd find its insane incompetence funny instead of just confusing if it was explained as him being drunk. Amy stupidly calls her parents and tells them she needs more money and tells them to sell all of her stuff. Even the ponies. This is just tragic, because I know he'll be fine. They won't have the guts to actually kill him off, and if they did, he'd be back in a later issue anyways. If she had a brain, she would say, screw that tradition. Because there was already a movie where he died and then came back. Bender interrupts the person delivering him something the next day. I wonder how he's getting the money for all this, but that makes more sense than what's parodying too. He must have been charging it to Fry's credit card. And he has a job too. He puts garbage on the floor to use it as bait for the Roomba. Fry says entertainingly, "We can just throw garbage on the floor now? Cool. I was just taking these bags out for the professor." Hilariously, Bender says, "Now I don't know where the catapult is." He tells him to stomp around the area and help him find it, and he gets flung away by it. I wish I saw a lot more plots like this in the comic. It's amazing how much better a job it does with it. This is better than the thing it's parodying. Kif continues being out of character by not being impressed by Amy doing something really expensive again and telling her to spend even more. It's a shame he won't get the idea that's not the amount she's spending that's upsetting him. He's just gonna be sad no matter what because he thinks he doesn't have long to live. But neither of them get that when she should give up. I don't really care about the details of the scene. Is it just me or has Amy gained weight? She's at least got as much weight as she accuses Leela of having. Kif should have taken the hint when even Zap told him that he was being too hard on someone. Kif accuses Zap of being really cheap with his dates. And Kif insults Zap a lot. Which also seems out of character to me. But that's because I'm used to him just meekly putting up with them. And really it's just him going back to his original character as a deadpan snarker out of stress. Since when is Zap sensitive enough to cry because of the shock of Kif insulting him a lot? I always got the impression that he was incapable of caring about what someone who's not a woman thinks of him or considering that they're right. Bender tells the Roomba that he gives up, and tries to make it more convincing by talking as if giving up is something he does a lot. But as soon as he tells the Roomba that he's got an invite to a wake for him, it's obvious that he's up to something. He says it'll be a good way to bury the hatchet. And not to assume for the purpose of the story making sense that the Roombas have earshot when he continues that thanks to the folks at FIMO, this will be an even better way, as we see a box of BIMO TNT, in what's somehow an atomic hatchet, and exploding popcorn. I wonder if Wile E. Coyote ever tried telling the Roadrunner that he gives up and biting him somewhere before. It seems new to me, and I hope it is. He'd take advantage of the fact that the Roomba's a robot who's more sentient than a mere animal, and it makes Bender look like he's good at coming up with successful plans. And if he was doing this specifically so that Scruffy wouldn't get fired, he could have easily been shown as in the right. but instead I don't have to feel bad about him failing. It's very hard for me to be interested in the variety of things Amy's spending money on for Kif's funeral, because I know it's always the same two jokes. It doesn't matter to me what exactly she does. It's the day at Kif's funeral and Kif still isn't impressed. Thankfully, Amy calls him out on this, and Kif says he should have asked someone classier to plan his wake. To be fair, Amy's the opposite of classy. Just look at what she usually wears. You'd expect him to be wrong because she's a rich girl, but he's not. He's just stupid for saying this in front of his girlfriend and expecting no consequences. Zoidberg says that if he was a doctor, he'd say something was wrong with Kif. He wouldn't forget he's a doctor. Kif's doctor overhears Fry defending Kif, and when Zoidberg calls Kif a jerk, he wonders how he missed this and calls himself a bad doctor. Go figure, he gave him the wrong diagnosis. Initially, deathism has the same symptoms of a non-fatal similar disease, and later symptoms of that include becoming a self-centered jerk. I'm really impressed that the writer explained this. I wasn't expecting that, and he is an alien, so I'm willing to give the story some leeway. For a human, this sounds completely ridiculous, but this is a guy who doesn't have any bones and is made out of bladders. Who knows what alien diseases would be like? The doctor says that if Kif had deathism, he would have died hours ago. And he just told him it would be tomorrow to be nice. It's unrealistic that a doctor would lie to his patient. I know that in one country it's tradition to not tell an old person that he has cancer. The world sucks, and maybe it's happened, but it's very unlikely for Kif. Kif complains that now he doesn't even get to die, and that makes sense because his life sucks, and he just got him in trouble treating Amy like dirt. Somehow the doctor can't say for sure whether or not Kif's gonna be a jerk forever, when I was hoping he was a better doctor than Zoidberg. He says sometimes a sudden shock cures jerkatosis. How convenient. That's much harder to believe. It's a mental condition, not the hiccups. Amy hugs him, saying that she's just so happy he's not dying. That's a good girlfriend moment. He doesn't appreciate her hug because he's so disappointed that he has to work for Zap. What makes him think he has to? And he wants popcorn, but it's the exploding popcorn, and the explosion fixed them. Magically, nobody's injured but Bender, even though Kif was the closest one to the popcorn. When this is already a comic with no continuity that's ended stories with the end of the world before. Thankfully, Kif apologizes to Amy and even lampshades that he's been acting like Zap. And lucky for him, Amy just says she loves him because she's just so happy to have the real him back, and happy that he's not dying. This is just 2 panels been back to normal. It cuts ahead in time to someone saying that this has been Bimo Weapons' most profitable year thanks entirely to Bender. So he thanks the CEO who went undercover as a janitor to make this all happen. And the story ends with the Roomba being revealed to be that janitor. If he wasn't really a janitor, how did he get the Janitors Association, or whatever it's called, to list him as a horrible janitor for other people? This makes less sense than him actually being what he seemed. Futurama comic, issue 80. It starts out wasting our time with a woman competing with Nixon for the title of the next president. But why should I care when it's guaranteed that he'll be written to win to preserve the status quo? Does Nixon even do enough in the series to justify keeping him in that position? Granted, it's iconic of the series, but it's also too depressing. I never saw how it was funny. One of his opponents is a woman with a skeleton body who promises transparency. Then there's a fireman opponent who says he'll burn things. Why was he allowed to be here and considered for the running? Was he literally put there to have someone that had no chance of winning? For Nixon's sake? Then for no reason there's a cloned head of Nixon who's also in the running. He says they're very different people, but he doesn't give any evidence, so I don't believe him. Especially because he's sweating. Why would he be in the running? It's redundant. Nixon's asked how he's sweating when he's floating in liquid. Don't have a character ask a question you're not prepared to answer. He clearly doesn't have a plan to protect people from frost giants, because he says and comes up with a plan on the spot to deport them all. Then he gets threatened by frost giants out of nowhere who get offended, showing how unlikely that plan would be to work. How did he just notice them when they're that tall and they're right in front of him? The reporter Linda says that the fire candidate was extinguished. Morbo doesn't explain why he thinks democracy is for the weak. I can understand him criticizing that it's just a big popularity contest instead of based on merit, but his criticism makes no sense. Fry lampshades how stupid it is that Nixon's still president, and he eats some corn and gets told he ate self-popping popcorn that needs to be left out for a minute after opening the bag, so it pops out of his mouth. I'm not sure it would actually be sold. This is an entertaining series with a charming art style, and it is a fun challenge to see how many different ways it doesn't make sense. But it's also disappointing how often it confuses me. I grew up with this show, I remembered it being funnier. Somehow there's a ridiculous amount of popcorn after that, and Fry's friends complain about it as they're standing in it. Zoidberg's thankful for the popcorn, and they laugh as he walks away. Leela wonders if they were too hard on Fry. Bender justifies that they have to be mean to people because it's the only way they'll learn. And then whips Kubert, telling him to go back to his drumming lesson in a take that scrappy moment that scares him. Nixon welcomes Wernstrom to his office because there's only 85 people who consider voting for him on Earth. He complains that he can't pull the wool over their eyes anymore. Wernstrom says he needs to be more honest. When he should know, that would just make it more obvious how shady he is. Wernstrom tells him to make people stupider. Isn't it obvious that we need some people to be smart for the world to function, like engineers, surgeons, and doctors? He's got a one-track mind, only focusing on the one benefit this is going to have for him and not thinking about unexpected consequences, like, say, his limo getting into a crash because of a dumber limo driver. How could they be that stupid? I'd expect Wernstrom to be the one with a little more stringent moral standards because it'd contrast him from Farnsworth, because they're rivals. Instead he suggests a baby brain spawn that can send out stupid waves, and it can use a large enough antenna to stupid up the world until the election. Somehow Wernstrom doesn't realize how this could backfire on him. He could be crashed into while driving to work because of this. Nixon says he knows just the antenna, instead of using another antenna. Then Fry lampshades that he doesn't know why Farnsworth makes him play 4th dimension battle chess, when he knows Fry doesn't know the rules. Isn't it obvious that he plays against Fry because he likes an easy win? Why does he ever agree to play against Farnsworth? It's not like Farnsworth threatens to fire him if he doesn't. After I watched The Jetsons, I'm glad he doesn't fire him or threaten his job every story. Because that'd get old fast and really make him hard to put up with. Considering how many jokes there are about his bad boss tendencies. We're lucky he doesn't threaten to fire him every episode. Fry wins the game from sheer luck, and then Leela says, "No time for your talking words," implying that everyone's been made stupid already. Either that or this is a product of her being made stupider as the series went on. But if everyone's already been made stupid, that would explain Fry beating Farnsworth in chess. Leela says they have a package to deliver. She says this is supposed to go to Earth, but Fry says that's the return address. So Leela does a swerve, making Fry fall and crashes the ship through her workplace building. This is meant to prove to Fry that everyone really has been made stupider, when I thought I'd see the moment it all started first. But it shows how ditzy the professor is when there was an entire comic story before this where Farnsworth mistook a package for him for a package that has to be delivered. Leela made the same mistake as him here, and he's supposed to be a genius. Bender doesn't care about how Fry looks and tells him to be quiet because he's watching All My Circuits, where for some reason they let it go to air even though all of the actors clearly forgot their lines and asked for them. Why would they film episodes of the show and air them so quickly? Why would the effect of the stupidity ray be apparent on one of the episodes of a TV show, when usually episodes are produced a week or months in advance, which is common sense to do just in case? Fry says he's seen this before, and since he says he needs to talk to the smartest member of the crew, this implies that he's talking about him seeing people being stupider before, and not the episode. If the episode was a rerun, that happens to be the episode that was filmed on the previous day that the brains made everyone stupid by coincidence. That'd make more sense. Bender bets him a lot of money that he can eat his own legs, and Zoidberg assumes Fry thinks he's the smartest and is busy making a delicious seafood bisque out of himself. But everyone being impossibly stupid is justified. So for once, the stupid humor can just be funny without being annoying. Nixon records a commercial that it's time to vote for him on the same day that he made the world stupider. I liked that the dog was barking and he told it to be quiet. I guess he's not immune to the stupid waves, because if he was smart, he would have cut that out of the commercial because it made him look bad. Fry tells his crew off for being in favor of Nixon because they thankfully all hate him normally, and he says that he's tried to kill them before more than once. Scruffy is portrayed as stupid, and Fry tells Nibbler that the brain spawn are back and making everyone stupid. I thought he was made to forget about that, as well as him being able to talk, but he doesn't even react to finding out that he can talk again. And Nibbler doesn't question this, which is especially confusing. Nibbler says he's been using a convenient IQ thermometer on everyone, which is used in a really primitive way considering how futuristic this place is. Nibbler gives him some obvious advice to find the source of the problem, and ends up getting affected too. And at least he warns him that he's gonna go feral ahead of time, so Fry has a chance to run away. He looks scary with his mouth stretched so large, and at least Leela tells him not to hurt Fry. 10 minutes later, Fry loses Nibbler in a buffet and gets told to fix them lunch because he can't remember how the stove works. They're amazed by him turning on the stove to make him a grilled cheese sandwich. And Fry likes being called the smartest person in the world, and wants to let this go on for longer, which is shocking of him. Did he do this in the episode? This is something I'd expect of Bender. Amy offers her friends owl poison and nobody questions it, and somehow this doesn't cause Fry to freak out, and instead he shrugs it off. He wonders what's the worst that could happen if Nixon came to power again, and then he imagines him turning his friends into a zombie army, and says cool while being opposed to it. He prevents his friends from eating the poison, and Bender says they should find and stop whatever is making everyone so stupid. He says he stuck his finger in an electric socket, and the burst of electricity super sped up his brain for a while because he's a robot. We should have seen that happen. At the very least because it'd be slapstick against him. It's more interesting that Fry isn't the only one with common sense this time around, and tries to make up for the fact that the story is lazily reusing a plot point from the show, making the story forgettable, instead of being creative. Bender says he can trace the signal of the brain spawn waves with his antenna, and he says it's coming from the Empire State Building. It's kind of funny that a hot dog vendor asks if anyone knows how to make a hot dog. Fry says he's gonna have to walk because people are taking their bikes, surfboards, and horses into the tubes. I wonder if people would actually make that mistake with surfboards. It was predictable that Bender would be only immune to the stupid waves temporarily, but I didn't think he'd become a gullible idiot this quickly. He says he's gonna sign up for a personality test at a church. I wish he explained why that was just as stupid as buying a house near a black hole, just to clarify things for people who don't get what he's referencing. It seems to me like personality tests are pointless, because you should already know what your personality is. But a lot of things are a pointless waste of time without being as dumb as what he's talking about. Fry tells Bender he's getting dumb again and needs to power up his brain. He reaches for a streetlight to electrocute himself, which somehow makes him immune to the brainwashing wave, instead of damaging him so that he can't help Fry. He looks on the bright side about being in darkness, but why would they be in darkness during the day just because of a damaged streetlight outside? Fry can't get in the front door because it's covered in garbage and owls. Stupidity or not, why does the garbage be put there of all places, in a world where everyone's brainwashed into supporting Nixon? Bender stretches his limbs to climb the building with Fry, and Mario makes a cameo, somehow mistaking Fry for Lady when he has short hair. That's such a random reference. He gets crushed by a barrel, and Fry naturally wonders where Bender got that, because it wouldn't fit in his chest. Then Bender forgets who Fry is, and throws him through a window, which somehow doesn't immediately kill or injure him from the shards of glass. I have a feeling this is definitely worse than the original episode, and I don't fully remember it. This just seems less believable. Speaking of less believable, he happens to encounter Wernstrom because he was thrown through just the right window, instead of having to run around to find him himself. Wernstrom says he doesn't think they've ever really been introduced. Really? Farnsworth is around Fry a lot. He's here causing the dumbness. Fry thankfully punches him. I don't know why they just draw a flash of light on him instead of showing its fist impact him. This is a show that was on Adult Swim, but at least we can see his fist making contact with a part of his body regardless. I love that he stood up to him. He wishes Fry would have let him finish. What do you expect? He says he hooked up the brain spawn, but when he came back to check on it, why did he check on it? Isn't he confident in his own idea? He would be. When he came back to check on it, the president was here, and set the levels way too high. Wernstrom was worried that he'd make the world permanently stupid by blowing up the control panel. Nixon really grabbed the idiot ball by deciding to do this. He doesn't want to have to go through this nonsense every 4 years, but everyone being stupid would much better qualify as nonsense. Isn't it immediately obvious that he should have people be stupid for as small amount of time as possible for his own safety? The brain spawn wanted to make people stupid, so it would have made sense if it was the brain spawn that wanted to make this permanent, and it was Wernstrom's fault for relying on a dangerous alien that he underestimated the dangerousness of, when its mother could be looking for it. It could also be explained that the reason Nixon's making this unnecessary mistake is that he's been made stupid too. But I think he and Wernstrom are wearing hats to make them immune, and Wernstrom even explains it. Of course he would make sure he was immune. So the hats mask their delta waves? His tiny robot arm hit Wernstrom and locked him in this room. Fry unnecessarily compliments his hat and gets thanked. Wernstrom says they only have 5 minutes before the explosion. I guess he automatically assumed that Fry had a mutation that made him immune to the brain spawn. So that's why he didn't question how he was immune to it. Fry tells him there's a way out. They go through a tunnel and kicks off something to send Nixon out of the jar, but it's just a clone Nixon. But it turns out the clone is the one who wants to make everyone dumb forever instead, because he doesn't want people to know that he's not the real Nixon. But people would mistake him for him anyways. All he had to do is get rid of Nixon and then turn the stupid waves off. I like that it's using him again in the story instead of him just being there for an unfunny, confusing joke and forgotten. Why are there 3 hats for immunity anyways? Why did both Nixons have the hats? Of course one of them hatched an evil plan then. Fry cleverly flatters him about his plan to put him into a false sense of security. He asks if he has any room in his cabinet for the smartest man on Earth. He's told to prove his loyalty and takes off Nixon's hat. The other Nixon says that now nothing can stop the stupid. Fry gives him some warning stupidly by saying nothing except this, and then calls out that there's booze in Nixon's jar. So Bender goes to drink it. Fry puts the 2 Nixon heads in the same jar, and as the machine's about to explode, Wernstrom worries because he can't disconnect the brain spawn. Won't it explode and cause the stupid waves to stop because the thing generating it isn't around anymore? Fry puts a hat on the brain and somehow survives the explosion. And somehow the baseball cap protected the brain spawn from harm and returns everyone to normal. The 2 Nixons accuse each other of being an imposter, and because of this, both have been elected. Wouldn't that be illegal? And no one can remember what happened during the dummining, except Fry. Won't somebody be recording stuff with their cell phone? Bender complains about how everything tastes bad, so he does have a sense of taste. What took Farnsworth so long? Hermes gets mad at Farnsworth for giving everyone a raise, I guess because they don't have the budget for it, because he wastes his money most of the time. Because at first that just looks like him insulting him for doing something good, because it's good. Hermes should know that it's not his fault he did that. Zoidberg woke up with the turtle shell in the sewer, and just as I was wondering about it, it turns out he really did steal it from a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. The reason that's so weird is because you can't actually separate a turtle from its shell. I guess the reason that was written was because you can separate a Koopa from its shell. I loved Bender's plot, with him planting traps against the Roomba like he's Wile E. Coyote. It was actually better than what it was parodying. We have less reason to feel sorry for Bender and root for him. And the slapstick's better handled because it's more believable that a robot could survive it. Amy's plot was repetitive and annoying. I just didn't care what happened in it. I felt bad for Amy for wasting so much money. We should have been told from the start that Kif could only be acting ungrateful and entitled because of jerkatosis. It came out of nowhere as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Considering how often comedic sociopathy happens as a joke in the series, of course it wasn't obvious that Kif actually had something wrong with him explaining this. Other than the ridiculously large coffin, it's not interesting and memorable what things are shown off when Amy's making funeral arrangements. This story lazily reuses the idea from the show of everyone being made stupider, which was in AOSDH 2, because of brain spawn aliens. But this time, it's an intentional plan between Nixon and Wernstrom so that it can guarantee his re-election. What a shame that he managed to find a brain spawn with no explanation just to have the story, even though it's from a different planet. I wish I was told how much Wernstrom was being paid to do this, because that is the only way this would make sense. This time it's different because Bender can retain his intelligence temporarily, even if in a way that would logically just fry his circuits. So he's kind of useful to Fry, guiding him to where he needs to go and climbing the building. Somehow Fry survives going through a window just fine, and cleverly pretends to be stupid to trick Nixon's clone, but then calls out for Bender to defeat him with his stupidity. He should have known that making people stupid would backfire on him in so many different ways that could potentially kill or hurt him. He clearly didn't need to try and make it permanent, because it was so obvious he could keep doing this every 4 years to stay president forever, and even that was too reckless. And the clone Nixon would be able to switch places with the other Nixon just fine. And you'd think that if someone knew that voting for him objectively wasn't smart, to the point where he had to make people dumber in a plan to get voted for, he'd know that he doesn't deserve to be the president. He just loves doing his job that much,